Caleb Morrison hadn't prayed in 7 years. Not since the fever took his wife and son in the same cruel week. But when he heard children screaming through the blizzard and found 6 of them huddled around their bleeding mother in a broken wagon, a shadow of a man still chasing them through the snow, Caleb knew God was either giving him redemption or one final test. This is a story of survival second chances and the kind of love that rises from ashes. Stay until the end and comment your city below so I can see how far this story travels across the world. The screaming came first. Caleb Morrison pulled hard on the reins, his horse fighting against the wind that cut like broken glass across the Wyoming plains. He'd been riding since dawn, pushing through snow that reached his stirrups, trying to get back to his ranch before the worst of the blizzard hit. He should have kept riding, should have told himself it was just the wind playing tricks, or a wounded animal, or anything other than what it sounded like. Children. Children screaming for help. Easy, boy. He steadied his horse and listened. There it was again. High and desperate, cutting through the howling wind like a knife through butter. Caleb turned his horse toward the sound. His hands were numb inside his gloves, his face raw from the cold, but none of that mattered now. 7 years of silence. 7 years of keeping to himself. 7 years of pretending the world outside his ranch didn't exist. All of it fell away the moment he heard that cry. He found them near the old creek crossing, where the road dipped down between 2 ridges. A wagon sat tilted at a sickening angle, its front axle snapped clean in half. The canvas cover whipped and tore in the wind, and underneath it, Caleb could make out small shapes huddled together. 6 children, ranging from what looked like 15 down to a tiny thing that couldn't have been more than 2. And there, collapsed in the snow beside the wagon, was a woman. Mister, please." The oldest girl scrambled toward him. Her dress, soaked through her lips, blue from cold. "Please, you gotta help us. Mama fell, and she won't wake up, and there's blood and—" "Slow down." Caleb dismounted and grabbed the girl's shoulders. "How long has she been down?" "I don't know, maybe an hour. She was trying to fix the wheel, and then she just fell." Caleb pushed past her and dropped to his knees beside the woman. She was face down in the snow, her dark red hair spread around her like a stain. He turned her over as gently as he could. His breath caught. She was young, maybe early 30s, with a face that might have been pretty if it wasn't gray as ash and streaked with blood from a gash on her forehead. But it wasn't the injury that made Caleb's stomach turn. It was the bruises. Fading yellow and purple marks circled her wrists like bracelets. A healing cut split her lower lip. And when her coat fell open, he saw more bruises on her collarbone, the kind that came from fingers gripping too hard. Someone had been hurting this woman. Recently. "Is she dead?" The oldest girl was beside him now, her voice cracking. "Please, mister, tell me she ain't dead." Caleb pressed 2 fingers to the woman's throat. For a terrible moment, he felt nothing. Then there. Weak and thready, but there. "She's alive." He looked at the girl. "What's your name?" "Hannah. Hannah Brennan." "All right, Hannah. I need you to be strong right now. Your mama needs you to be strong. Can you do that?" Hannah nodded, though her whole body was shaking. "Good. How many brothers and sisters?" 5. Elijah's 13. Grace is 10. Joseph is 7. Lily's 5. And baby Thomas is 2. 6 children. Caleb looked at them, huddled in the wagon. 6 pairs of terrified eyes staring back at him. The smallest one, the baby, was crying softly, his face red and chapped from the cold. "My ranch is about 4 miles north." Caleb lifted the woman into his arms. She weighed almost nothing, all bones and exhaustion. "Can you and your brother get the little ones there on foot?" "We'll crawl if we have to," Hannah said, and something in her voice told Caleb she meant it. "Elijah," he called toward the wagon. "Get out here. I need your help." A boy emerged from the canvas, tall for 13, with dark hair and eyes that held more anger than fear. He looked at Caleb with suspicion, his jaw tight. "Who are you?" "Name's Caleb Morrison. I'm gonna help your mama, but I need you to help me get your brothers and sisters to my ranch. Can you do that?" Elijah's eyes moved to his mother unconscious in Caleb's arms, and something in his face crumbled. "Yes, sir." "The little ones ride my horse. You and Hannah walk with me. We move fast, we stop for nothing. Understood?" "Yes, sir." They set out into the blizzard. The 4 miles to Caleb's ranch felt like 40. The wind screamed around them, driving snow into their faces until they could barely see 3 feet ahead. The woman in Caleb's arms. Ruth Hannah had said her name was Ruth, hadn't stirred once, and her breathing was getting shallower by the minute. "Keep talking to me, Hannah." Caleb said, his voice rough against the wind. "Tell me about your family. Where were you headed?" "West." Hannah was struggling to keep up, but she didn't complain. "Mama said there was land out west, where nobody would find us, where we could start over. Find you who's looking for you." Hannah went quiet. "Hannah. Uncle Silas." The name came out like poison. "He's our daddy's brother. Daddy died 6 months ago in a mining accident, and Uncle Silas said we belong to him now. Said Mama had to marry him, or he'd take us kids away." Caleb's jaw tightened. "And your mama said no." "Mama said she'd die before she let him touch her or us again." Hannah's voice cracked. "So we ran. Been running for 3 weeks now. He keeps finding us, keeps catching up. Last town we stopped in, someone told him where we went. He was maybe half a day behind us when the wagon broke." Half a day. That meant he could still be coming. "How far back?" Caleb asked. "Don't know. The snow might have slowed him down, but—" Hannah looked at him with eyes too old for her face. "He don't give up easy, mister. He wants what he thinks is his." Caleb didn't answer. He just kept walking, holding Ruth tighter against the wind. They reached the ranch as the last gray light of day was dying. Caleb's cabin wasn't much, 4 walls, a roof, a fireplace that drew well, but right now it looked like a palace. "Elijah, get the door. Hannah, there's matches on the mantel. Get a fire going. The rest of you inside. Now." The children moved like they'd been given orders their whole lives, quick and quiet and scared. Caleb carried Ruth to the bed. His bed, the only bed, and laid her down as gently as he could. She was cold. Too cold. "Hannah, I need blankets. All of them. And heat some water." "Yes, sir." Caleb knelt beside the bed and started unlacing Ruth's boots. They were soaked through, probably frozen to her feet. He worked carefully, trying not to hurt her, but she didn't stir. "Is Mama gonna die?" He turned. The little girl Lily he remembered was standing in the doorway, clutching a rag doll that looked like it had seen better days. Her eyes were huge in her pale face. "No," Caleb said, and he meant it. "No, she ain't gonna die, not if I can help it." Hannah returned with an armful of blankets, and together they worked to get Ruth out of her wet clothes and into something dry. Caleb turned away while Hannah handled the more delicate parts, but he couldn't stop thinking about those bruises, about the man who had put them there. "She needs to warm up from the inside," Caleb said. "Body heat's the fastest way. Hannah, I need you and your brothers and sisters to lie down with her. Share your warmth." Hannah nodded and climbed onto the bed without hesitation. One by one, the other children followed, curling around their mother like puppies around a dam. Even the baby Thomas was tucked against her side, his crying finally quiet. Caleb pulled his only chair beside the bed and sat down. His muscles ached from carrying Ruth through the snow. His bones felt like ice, but he couldn't rest. Not yet. "Mr. Caleb!" It was Joseph, the 7-year-old, peering at him from the pile of children. "Yeah. Are you going to send us away?" The question hit Caleb harder than he expected. He looked at this boy, at all of them 6 children who'd been running for their lives with a mother who couldn't protect them from the man hunting them down. "No," Caleb said. "No, I ain't gonna send you away." Promise. Caleb thought about promises. Thought about the ones he'd made to Caroline, to their son Samuel, promises he couldn't keep, because the fever took them anyway. He'd sworn off promises after that, sworn off caring about anything or anyone. But looking at Joseph's face, at the desperate hope in his eyes, Caleb found himself saying the words anyway. "I promise." Joseph smiled, the first smile Caleb had seen from any of them, and snuggled closer to his mother. The fire crackled. The wind howled outside, and Caleb sat watch over a family that wasn't his, waiting to see if their mother would live through the night. Ruth Brennan opened her eyes to an unfamiliar ceiling. For a moment, she couldn't remember where she was. Her head throbbed, her body ached, and there was a heaviness on her chest that made it hard to breathe. Then she realized the heaviness was her children piled on top of her, and around her, their small bodies warm against hers. They were alive. They were safe. But where? Easy now. Ruth turned her head and saw a man sitting in a chair beside the bed. Tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair going gray at the temples, and a face that looked like it had been carved from stone. His eyes were gray too, and they watched her with an intensity that made her want to pull her children closer. "Who are you?" Her voice came out as barely a whisper. "Caleb Morrison. Found you and your young ones in the storm about 10 hours ago. Brought you here." Ruth tried to sit up, but her head spun violently, and she fell back with a gasp. "Don't." Caleb's voice was firm but not unkind. "You took a bad hit to the head, lost a lot of blood. You need to rest. My children are all here, all 6 of them, fed and warm and scared out of their minds, but alive." Ruth's eyes burned with tears she refused to let fall. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet." Caleb leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "Hannah told me about your situation, about the man chasing you." Ruth's whole body went rigid. "Silas Brennan," Caleb continued. "Your brother-in-law. She said he was maybe half a day behind you when the wagon broke. That was yesterday. Storm probably slowed him down, but if he's as determined as she says, he'll find his way here eventually. Then we need to go." Ruth tried to sit up again, ignoring the dizziness. "We need to leave before—" "You ain't going nowhere." Caleb's hand pressed gently against her shoulder, easing her back down. "You can barely lift your head. Your wagon's busted, and there's 2 feet of snow on the ground with more coming. You try to run, now you'll die. Your children will die. Is that what you want?" "You don't understand." Ruth's voice cracked. "Silas, he won't just take us back. He'll kill me for running. He'll have to go through me first." Ruth stared at him. "You don't even know us." "Don't matter." Why would you risk yourself for strangers?" Caleb was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough, like the words were being dragged out of him against his will. "Because 7 years ago, I watched my wife and son die of fever. Watched them suffer, and couldn't do a damn thing to help. I've been living with that ever since, asking God why He let it happen, why He took them, and left me here alone." He met Ruth's eyes. "Maybe this is my answer. Maybe you and your children are the reason I'm still breathing." Ruth didn't know what to say to that. This man, this stranger, was offering her something she'd stopped believing in a long time ago: safety, protection, hope. "Mama." Hannah's voice was soft, sleepy. She was waking up, blinking in the dim light of the cabin. "I'm here, baby." Ruth reached out and stroked her daughter's hair. "I'm right here. You're awake." Hannah sat up, her face flooding with relief. "Oh, Mama, I was so scared. You wouldn't wake up, and there was so much blood and—" "Shh." Ruth pulled her close. "I'm all right. We're all right." One by one, the other children stirred. Joseph was the first to fully wake, his face breaking into a grin when he saw his mother's eyes open. "Mama, you're alive. Mr. Caleb said you would be, and he was right." "Mr. Caleb." Ruth looked at the man in the chair. "I promised him you wouldn't die." Caleb's expression didn't change, but there was something in his eyes, something almost like warmth. "Figured I better keep that promise." The morning passed in a blur of activity. Caleb made breakfast cornmeal porridge with the last of his salt pork, and the children fell on it like wolves. Ruth watched them eat, her heart breaking at how thin they'd become, how hungry. "When's the last time they had a proper meal?" Caleb asked quietly, standing beside her. 3 days ago, maybe 4. We've been rationing what little we had." "And you? When's the last time you ate?" Ruth didn't answer. She didn't need to. Caleb disappeared into what looked like a root cellar and came back with a jar of preserved peaches. He set it in front of Ruth without a word. "I can't take your eat. It wasn't a request. You're no good to those children if you're dead on your feet." Ruth ate. The peaches were sweet, almost painfully so, after days of nothing but hard bread and melted snow. She felt Caleb watching her, and something about his gaze made her uncomfortable. Not because it was threatening, because it wasn't. "You keep looking at me like you're waiting for something," she said finally. "Just wondering." "Wondering what?" "How a woman with 6 children and bruises all over her body still has fight left in her eyes." Ruth set down the jar. "You want to know about the bruises? Only if you want to tell me." She didn't want to tell him, didn't want to tell anyone. But something about this quiet man with his sad eyes and gentle hands made her feel like maybe, just maybe, it was safe to speak. "Thomas, my husband. He wasn't a bad man," she began. "Weak, maybe. Scared of his own shadow. But not bad. The problem was his brother. Silas." "Silas." Ruth's hands clenched in her lap. "He was always there, always watching. Thomas worked in the mine, and Silas was the foreman. He controlled everything, our money, our house, where the children went to school. Thomas just let him, said it was easier that way. And when Thomas died, Silas said the family owed him, said Thomas had been borrowing from him for years, and now the debt was mine to pay." Ruth's voice hardened. "He wanted me to marry him. Said if I didn't, he'd take the children. Said no court would give a widow custody over a man with money and standing. So you ran." "I ran." Ruth looked at her children scattered around the small cabin and felt the familiar mix of love and terror that had driven her every moment for the past 3 weeks. "Packed what we could carry in the middle of the night and ran. But he keeps finding us. Every town, every stop, someone tells him where we went. It's like he's got eyes everywhere." "He probably does." Caleb's jaw tightened. "Men like that, they got reach, got influence, but they ain't got everything." "What do they not got?" "Me." Ruth almost laughed. "You, one man against Silas and whoever he brings with him. One man who knows this land better than anyone alive. One man with nothing left to lose." Caleb met her eyes. "You think I'm scared of your brother-in-law? I've faced down Confederate soldiers and Comanche raiders, and a fever that took everything I loved. Silas Brennan don't frighten me." "He should." Ruth's voice dropped. "You don't know what he's capable of." "Then tell me." Ruth was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "The night before we ran, he came to our house. Thomas had only been dead a week. Silas said he was there to comfort me, to talk about arrangements. But when I told him I wouldn't marry him, he—" She stopped, swallowing hard. "He grabbed me, threw me against the wall, said if I couldn't be his wife willingly, he'd make sure no other man would ever want me." Caleb's hands curled into fists. "Hannah walked in," Ruth continued. "Saw what was happening. Silas let me go, but the look he gave her, the way he looked at my daughter." Her voice broke. "That's when I knew we had to run, that same night." "He touched Hannah." "No, but he wanted to. I saw it in his eyes." Ruth looked at Caleb with a fierceness that burned through her exhaustion. "I will die before I let him near my children. Do you understand me? I will kill him myself if I have to." "You won't have to." Caleb stood up, his expression hard as iron. "If Silas Brennan comes to this ranch, he won't leave it alive. That's a promise." Ruth stared at him, this stranger who was promising to protect her family, and felt something she hadn't felt in years. Not hope, not quite, but something close. The days began to blur together. Ruth grew stronger slowly. By the third day, she could walk across the cabin without getting dizzy. By the fifth, she was helping with meals and laundry, despite Caleb's protests that she needed to rest. "I've been resting for 5 days," she told him firmly. "I need to be useful, need to earn my keep." "You don't need to earn anything." "Yes, I do." Ruth looked at him with those fierce green eyes. "I'm not charity, Mr. Morrison. I'm not some helpless creature you rescued from the snow. I'm a woman who takes care of her family, and I will not be a burden." Caleb almost smiled. Almost. "Fine. You can help with the cooking. But if you start feeling poorly, you sit down. Understood?" Understood. The children, meanwhile, were adapting faster than Ruth had dared hope. Joseph followed Caleb everywhere, peppering him with questions about horses and cattle and guns. Grace found paper and charcoal somewhere and spent hours drawing pictures of the snow-covered landscape. Even baby Thomas had stopped crying, so much content to toddle around the warm cabin with his thumb in his mouth. But Elijah worried her. Her oldest son spent most of his time alone, either staring out the window or chopping wood with a violence that made Ruth's chest tight. He barely spoke, and when he did, his voice was sharp, angry. "Elijah!" Ruth found him behind the barn, attacking a log with an axe. "We need to talk." "Nothing to talk about." "I disagree." Elijah swung the axe down hard, splitting the log clean in half. "What do you want, Ma?" "I want to know what's going on in your head." "Nothing's going on in my head." "Elijah Thomas Brennan, don't you lie to me." Her son stopped. His shoulders were heaving, his breath coming in white puffs in the cold air. When he turned to face her, there were tears in his eyes. "It's my fault," he said. "All of this. It's my fault." "What are you talking about?" "Uncle Silas, the last town. I went to get supplies, and this man started asking questions about where we came from, where we were going. I didn't think nothing of it. Just talked to him like he was being friendly." Elijah's voice cracked. "But he wasn't being friendly, was he? He was working for Uncle Silas. That's how Silas found us. Because I was too stupid to keep my mouth shut." Ruth's heart shattered. "Oh, baby." She crossed to him and pulled him into her arms, even though he was taller than her now, even though he tried to pull away. "That wasn't your fault. None of this is your fault." "Yes, it is." "No." Ruth held him tighter. "Silas has been tracking us from the beginning. He's got money connections, people who owe him favors. Even if you hadn't talked to that man, he would have found another way." "But listen to me." Ruth pulled back and gripped her son's face in her hands. "You are 13 years old. You have been braver and stronger than any boy your age should have to be. You've helped me protect your brothers and sisters every single day since we left. If anyone's to blame for what's happened to this family, it's me." "You ma know. I married your father." Ruth's voice was heavy with old guilt. "I knew what Silas was like, knew he was dangerous. But I told myself it would be fine, that Thomas would protect us. And when he didn't, when he couldn't, I stayed anyway. For years. That's on me, Elijah, not you." Elijah was crying now, really crying the way he hadn't since he was a little boy. "I don't want him to find us," he whispered. "I don't want to go back." "We're not going back. Ever. But what if he... Then we'll fight." Ruth wiped her son's tears with her thumbs. "We didn't come all this way to give up now, and that man in there, Mr. Morrison, he's going to help us. I believe that." Why? Elijah pulled back, suspicious. Why would some stranger help us? What does he want? I don't think he wants anything. Everybody wants something. Ma, you taught me that. Ruth was quiet for a moment. Her son was right, of course. She had taught him that. Years of living under Silas's thumb had taught her to distrust kindness, to look for hidden motives behind every generous gesture. But Caleb Morrison didn't feel like a man with hidden motives. He felt like a man who was broken and trying to put himself back together, just like her. Maybe, she said finally, maybe he just wants to not be alone anymore. Elijah didn't look convinced, but he nodded and went back to chopping wood. Ruth watched him for a moment, then turned back toward the cabin. Caleb was standing on the porch watching her. He blames himself, she said as she approached. I heard. Caleb's expression was unreadable. Kid's carrying a lot of weight for 13. His father died. His uncle tried to... Ruth couldn't finish the sentence. He thinks he has to be the man of the family now. Does he? Ruth stopped at the bottom of the porch steps. What do you mean? I mean, does he have to be the man of the family? Or is there someone else who could take some of that weight off his shoulders? Ruth felt her breath catch. Mr. Morrison. Caleb. Caleb. She said his name carefully, like she was testing how it felt in her mouth. I appreciate everything you've done for us. Truly. But we can't stay here forever. As soon as I'm strong enough, as soon as the snow clears, you'll keep running. How long do you think you can run with 6 children and no money, and a man like Silas hunting you down? As long as I have to. And when he catches you, because he will catch you, Ruth. Men like him don't give up. They don't stop. The only way to stop a man like Silas Brennan is to make him stop. Ruth stared at him. You're talking about killing him. I'm talking about ending the threat. Permanently. That's murder. Is it? Caleb stepped closer. When a wolf comes for your flock, do you let it take what it wants? Or do you put it down before it can hurt anyone else? Silas isn't a wolf, he's a man. Is he? Caleb's voice was hard. Because from what I've heard, he beats women, threatens children, and hunts down families through the snow like prey. That don't sound like a man to me. That sounds like something wearing a man's skin. Ruth didn't have an answer for that. The truth was, she'd thought about killing Silas, dreamed about it. In the dark hours of the night, when her children were asleep, and she was lying awake listening for footsteps, she'd imagined taking her husband's old hunting rifle and putting a bullet between Silas's eyes. But she'd never said it out loud, never admitted it to anyone. Even if I wanted that, she said quietly, even if I could live with it, it wouldn't solve anything. Silas has friends, family, people who would come looking for answers. Let them come. You don't mean that. Caleb's gray eyes met hers, and Ruth saw something in them that made her shiver. Not fear, recognition. This man had killed before. She was certain of it now. I spent 4 years fighting in a war that was supposed to mean something, Caleb said. Watched good men die for causes that turned out to be lies. Then I came home and watched my wife and son die for no reason at all. His voice was flat empty. I stopped believing in meaning a long time ago. But protecting you and those children, that means something. First thing that's meant something in 7 years. Ruth didn't know what to say. So she said the only thing that was true. I'm scared. I know. Not of Silas, not of running. I'm scared of... She stopped, struggling to find the words. I'm scared of hoping. Every time I've hoped for something, it's been taken away. Thomas was supposed to protect us, and he couldn't. The towns we stopped in were supposed to be safe, and they weren't. What if I hope that things will be different here, and they're not? What if I let my children believe we're finally safe, and Silas takes that away too? Caleb was quiet for a long moment. Then he said something that Ruth didn't expect. My wife's name was Sarah. Our son was Samuel. He was 5 when the fever took him. His voice was steady, but Ruth could see the pain behind his eyes. For 7 years I've been too scared to hope for anything. Too scared to want anything. Because wanting means losing, and losing means pain, and I figured I'd had enough pain for one lifetime. He stepped down from the porch close enough that Ruth could see the gray in his stubble, the lines around his eyes. But then you showed up, you and 6 children who needed help. And for the first time in 7 years, I wanted something. I wanted to save you. I wanted to protect you. I wanted... He stopped, swallowing hard. I wanted a reason to keep living. Ruth felt tears burning in her eyes. Caleb, I ain't asking for anything, he said quickly. I know you're scared. I know you've got no reason to trust me or anyone else. But I'm asking you to give me a chance. Give this place a chance. Let me help you fight, not run. Because running ain't living, Ruth. It's just dying slow. Ruth looked at this man, this broken, lonely man, who was offering her everything she'd been too scared to want. And for the first time in longer than she could remember, she let herself hope. Okay, she whispered. Okay. Caleb's face didn't change, but something in his eyes shifted. Relief, maybe. Or something deeper. Okay, he repeated. They stood there for a moment, the snow falling softly around them, neither one willing to break the silence. Then Joseph came running out of the cabin, his face bright with excitement. Mr. Caleb! Mr. Caleb, Hannah says supper's ready, and she made biscuits, and can I sit next to you? Caleb looked down at the boy, and Ruth saw something she hadn't seen before. A smile. Small, barely there, but real. Sure, Joseph. You can sit next to me. Joseph grabbed Caleb's hand and dragged him toward the cabin, chattering about the horses and the snow and 100 other things. Ruth watched them go, her heart full of something dangerous and wonderful and terrifying. Hope. She was starting to hope. And somewhere out there in the frozen wilderness between here and the life she'd left behind, Silas Brennan was getting closer. The second week at Caleb's ranch settled into something that almost felt like routine. Ruth woke each morning before dawn, her body still trained by years of rising, before Silas could find a reason to punish her for laziness. But here, in this small cabin with its crackling fire and the sound of her children breathing softly, there was no punishment waiting. Only Caleb, already awake, already working, moving through the darkness like a man who'd forgotten how to sleep. You don't have to get up this early, he said one morning, finding her at the stove. Neither do you. I got work to do. So do I. He looked at her for a long moment, then nodded and headed out to the barn. Ruth watched him go, feeling something shift in her chest. She was starting to understand him, this quiet man who spoke more with his hands than his words. Starting to see past the stone face to the grief underneath. It scared her how much she wanted to know more. Mama? Ruth turned. Hannah was sitting up on her pallet, rubbing sleep from her eyes. Morning, baby. How'd you sleep? Fine. Hannah stretched and stood moving to help with breakfast without being asked. Mama, can I talk to you about something? Always. Hannah glanced toward the door, making sure Caleb was gone. I like it here. I know you do. No, I mean... Hannah bit her lip. I really like it here. It feels safe. Like maybe we don't have to run anymore. Ruth's hands stilled on the pot she was stirring. Hannah, I know Uncle Silas is still out there. I know he's probably still looking. But Mama, for the first time since Daddy died, I don't feel scared all the time. I can breathe here. The little ones can play without looking over their shoulders. Hannah's voice dropped. Doesn't that mean something? Ruth set down the spoon and pulled her daughter into her arms. It means everything, baby. It means everything. Wah. So can we stay? Really stay? Ruth thought about Caleb's words from the night before. About fighting instead of running. About giving this place a chance. We'll see, she said. We'll see. The morning passed quickly. Ruth made breakfast while Hannah woke the other children. Joseph and Lily tumbled out of bed with their usual energy, immediately asking if they could go see the horses. Grace followed more quietly, her sketchbook already in hand. Baby Thomas toddled around Ruth's feet, babbling in that half-language of toddlers. Only Elijah stayed in bed, his back to the room. Elijah. Ruth touched his shoulder. Time to get up. I'm tired. You've been tired for 3 days. Come eat something. Not hungry. Ruth felt the familiar worry twist in her stomach. Her son was slipping away from her, retreating into some dark place she couldn't reach. She'd seen Thomas do the same thing in the years before he died, pulling inward, shutting everyone out. Elijah, please. I said I'm not hungry. He pulled the blanket over his head. Ruth stood there for a moment, helpless, then turned back to the others. She'd try again later. She always tried again. After breakfast, Caleb returned from the barn and announced he was taking Joseph and Lily to check on the cattle. Can I come? Grace asked, looking up from her drawing. If your mama says it's okay. Ruth nodded. Stay close to Mr. Caleb. Yes, Mama. The 3 children bundled up and followed Caleb out the door, their excited voices fading into the cold morning air. Ruth watched them go, her heart caught between gratitude and fear. He's good with them. Ruth turned. Hannah was beside her watching too. Yes, Ruth said. He is. Daddy was never like that. Hannah's voice was matter-of-fact, not bitter. He loved us. I know he did. But he never played with us. Never taught us things. He was always too tired, or too worried, or too scared, Ruth finished quietly. Your daddy was always scared. Of Uncle Silas. Of everything. The world was too big for your daddy, too hard. He did his best, but... Ruth sighed. Some men aren't built for fighting. They're built for surviving. There's a difference. What's Mr. Caleb built for? Ruth considered the question. She thought about the way Caleb moved confident and sure. The way he handled a rifle like it was part of his arm. The way his eyes went hard when she talked about Silas. Fighting, she said. Mr. Caleb is built for fighting. Hannah nodded slowly. Good. They worked in companionable silence after that, washing dishes and tidying the cabin. Ruth found herself humming as she worked an old hymn her mother used to sing. She couldn't remember the last time she'd hummed anything. Around midday, Caleb returned with the children. Joseph was talking a mile a minute about the cows and the snow, and how Mr. Caleb let him sit on his horse all by himself. Lily was carrying a smooth stone she'd found, convinced it was treasure. Grace had her sketchbook full of new drawings. Thank you, Ruth said to Caleb as the children scattered to play. They needed that. I needed it too. He said it so quietly, she almost didn't hear. Then louder. Where's Elijah? Still in bed. Caleb's jaw tightened. All day. He won't talk to me, won't eat. I've tried everything. Caleb was quiet for a moment. Then, let me try. Caleb, I don't think... Trust me. Ruth wanted to argue. Elijah was her son, her responsibility. She didn't need some stranger stepping in where he wasn't wanted. But something in Caleb's eyes stopped her. Something that said he understood what Elijah was going through in a way she never could. Okay, she said. Okay. Caleb crossed the cabin to where Elijah lay on his pallet blanket, still pulled over his head. Get up. Elijah didn't move. I said get up. I need help in the barn. I'm tired. I don't care. Caleb reached down and yanked the blanket away. You can be tired and working, or you can be tired and useless. Pick one. Elijah sat up, his face flushed with anger. You ain't my pa. You can't tell me what to do. You're right. I ain't your pa, but you're in my house eating my food, and while you're here, you'll pull your weight like everyone else. Now get up. Ruth watched her heart in her throat as her son and this man faced each other. She expected Elijah to explode, to scream, to do something reckless. Instead, after a long, tense moment, Elijah stood up. "Fine," he muttered. "Fine," Caleb repeated. "Barn. Now." They left together, and Ruth let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. "Mama," Hannah was watching her. "You okay?" "I don't know," Ruth admitted. "I honestly don't know." The afternoon stretched on. Ruth tried to focus on the work in front of her, mending clothes, preparing supper, keeping the little ones occupied, but her mind kept drifting to the barn. What was Caleb saying to her son? What was happening out there? Finally, just as the sun was starting to set, the barn door opened. Caleb came out first, followed by Elijah. They were both carrying armfuls of firewood, and they were both talking. Not arguing. Talking. Ruth couldn't hear what they were saying, but she could see the change in her son's posture. The rigid anger in his shoulders had softened. His head wasn't hanging quite so low. They stacked the wood on the porch, and Caleb said something that made Elijah almost smile. Almost. It was enough. "Thank you," Ruth said later after supper, after the children were settled for the night. She and Caleb were sitting on the porch again, wrapped in blankets against the cold. "Whatever you said to him, thank you." "I didn't say much. You got him out of bed. That's more than I managed in 3 days." Caleb was quiet for a moment. "He reminds me of myself. After the war. After everything." He stared out at the snow-covered landscape. "I came home from fighting, and I didn't know how to stop. Didn't know how to be anything other than angry and scared, and ready to fight the next battle. Took me years to figure out that the battle was over, that I was allowed to rest. And now I'm just tired." He looked at her. But a different kind of tired. The kind that comes from working hard, not from fighting. Ruth pulled her blanket tighter. "Elijah's been fighting since before he could walk. Silas was always there, always threatening, always making us afraid. Even Thomas couldn't protect us from him. So Elijah decided he had to be the protector. He was 8 years old." "That's too young." "I know. But what was I supposed to do? Tell him not to worry. Tell him everything would be fine when we both knew it wouldn't. You did what you had to do, same as him." Ruth felt tears prick her eyes. She blinked them back. "Sometimes I wonder if I ruined them. All of them. If growing up the way they did, scared all the time, running, hiding. If that's going to stay with them forever." "Probably will." Caleb's voice was honest, not cruel. "The things we go through, they leave marks. But marks ain't the same as ruins. Your children are strong, Ruth. Strong because of you, not despite you." "You really believe that?" "I've known you 2 weeks. In that time, I've watched you recover from injuries that would have killed most folks. Watched you take care of 6 children while barely able to stand. Watched you keep hope alive when you had every reason to give up." He turned to face her fully. "I've known a lot of people in my life. Fought alongside some of the bravest men you can imagine. But I ain't never met anyone as strong as you." Ruth didn't know what to say. No one had ever talked to her like that before. Not Thomas, who was always too worried about his own weakness to see her strength. Not her parents, who had sold her to the highest bidder when she was barely 16. Not anyone. "You don't know me," she whispered. "I'm starting to." They sat in silence after that, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the silence of 2 people who understood each other, who didn't need words to fill the space. When Ruth finally went inside to sleep, she found herself smiling. She couldn't remember the last time she'd smiled for no reason. The 3rd week brought a change in the weather. The snow stopped falling, and the sky cleared to a brilliant, painful blue. Caleb said it was a good sign that the worst of the winter might be over. Ruth wasn't sure she believed him, because with the clear weather came other things. A stranger passing through who asked too many questions at the general store in town. A report of a man matching Silas's description, seen at a ranch 20 miles south. He was getting closer. She could feel it. We need to talk about what happens when he comes, Caleb said one evening after the children were asleep. Ruth's stomach clenched. I know. I've been thinking. There's a root cellar under the barn. It's dry, secure, big enough to hide 7 people if needed. If Silas shows up, you take the children there, and you stay there until I come get you. And what will you be doing? Whatever needs doing. Ruth shook her head. No, I'm not hiding in a hole while you fight my battles. Ruth. No. She stood up, her hands shaking. I've spent my whole life hiding. Hiding from Silas, hiding from the truth, hiding from everything that scared me. I'm done hiding, Caleb. If Silas comes here, I'm going to face him. I'm going to look him in the eye and tell him he doesn't own me, doesn't own my children, doesn't own anything. And then what? He's not going to just walk away because you tell him to. Then I'll make him walk away. Caleb stood too, moving closer. You're not thinking straight. I'm thinking straighter than I have in years. He'll hurt you. He'll hurt the children. He's been hurting us for 15 years. Ruth's voice cracked. The only thing that's changed is that now I'm willing to fight back. They were standing close now, close enough that Ruth could see the fear in Caleb's eyes. Not fear for himself, fear for her. I can't lose you, he said, his voice rough. I just found you. I can't. You won't lose me. Ruth reached up and touched his face, her fingers brushing against the stubble on his jaw. I'm not going anywhere. Caleb closed his eyes, leaning into her touch. You can't promise that. No, but I can promise I'll fight. For myself, for my children, for... She hesitated. For whatever this is between us. His eyes opened gray and deep and full of something she was afraid to name. Ruth, don't say anything. She pulled her hand back. I know it's too soon. I know I'm still married to a dead man and running from his brother, and we've only known each other 3 weeks. I know all of that. But I also know that when I'm with you, I feel safe. I feel seen. I feel like maybe, just maybe, I deserve to be happy. You do deserve to be happy. Then help me fight for it. Don't hide me away like something fragile. Stand beside me. Caleb was silent for a long moment. Ruth could see the war happening behind his eyes, the need to protect battling against her, need to be seen as an equal. Finally, he nodded. Okay, he said. We fight together. Together. The word hung between them like a promise. The next morning, Ruth woke to find Hannah already up, staring out the window with an expression Ruth couldn't read. Hannah, what's wrong? Nothing's wrong. Hannah turned, and Ruth was startled to see tears on her cheeks. Mama, I heard you and Mr. Caleb talking last night. Ruth's face heated. Hannah, you like him. Really like him. Ruth didn't know how to answer. It's complicated. No, it ain't. Hannah crossed the room and sat beside her mother. Mama, I've watched you suffer for 15 years. Watched you give up everything to keep us safe. And I've never not once seen you happy. She took Ruth's hands. When you're with Mr. Caleb, you're happy. I can see it. It's too soon, Hannah. Your father... Daddy's dead. Hannah's voice was gentle but firm. I loved him, and I know you did too in your way. But he's gone, Mama. And Uncle Silas was never going to let us go, not ever, not unless someone stopped him. She squeezed Ruth's hands. Maybe Mr. Caleb is that someone. Maybe this place is where we're supposed to be. Ruth felt tears sliding down her own cheeks. When did you get so wise? I learned from the best. They held each other for a long moment, mother and daughter, 2 survivors who had finally found something worth fighting for. There's something else, Hannah said, pulling back. Elijah talked to me this morning about what Mr. Caleb said to him in the barn. What did he say? He said, Hannah paused, choosing her words carefully. He said that being strong doesn't mean carrying everything alone. It means knowing when to let other people help. He said that Elijah's been trying to be a man since he was 8 years old, and it's okay to just be a boy sometimes. Ruth's heart clenched. Caleb said that... He said something else too. He said that the bravest thing a person can do isn't fighting. It's trusting someone enough to let them fight beside you. Ruth thought about those words all day. Thought about all the years she'd spent fighting alone, protecting her children alone, surviving alone. She'd been so focused on keeping everyone safe that she'd forgotten what it felt like to have someone in her corner. But Caleb was in her corner now, and she was starting to believe he might stay there. That evening she found him in the barn brushing down his horse. She stood in the doorway for a moment watching him work. His movements were gentle, careful, the same way he was with her children. "You gonna stand there all night?" he asked without turning around. "Maybe." He looked at her, then a hint of a smile on his face. "Something on your mind?" "Hannah told me what you said to Elijah, about being strong." Caleb shrugged. "Just talking." It meant something to him. It meant something to me, too. He set down the brush and turned to face her fully. "Ruth." "I've been thinking," she interrupted, "about what you said, about fighting together. And I realized something." She stepped closer. "I've never had a partner before. Not really. Thomas he was there, but he wasn't with me. Do you understand? He was in the same house, but he wasn't in the same fight." "I understand. I don't want that again. If we're going to do this, whatever this is, I need you to be with me. Not protecting me from the sidelines, not hiding me away. With me." Caleb's expression softened. "I ain't good at standing back." "Neither am I. Might cause some problems." "Probably will." He took another step toward her, close enough now that she could feel the warmth radiating off him. "I ain't been with anyone since Sarah. Ain't wanted to be. And now? Now I want things I ain't let myself want in 7 years. His hand came up, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "You changed something in me, Ruth Brennan. Something I thought was dead and buried. Is that a good thing?" "I think so." His thumb traced along her cheekbone. "Scares the hell out of me, but I think so." Ruth leaned into his touch. "I'm scared too." "Then we'll be scared together." She almost laughed. Almost. "That's your solution. Being scared together. Only solution I got." His voice dropped lower. "I ain't got pretty words, Ruth. I ain't got promises I know I can keep. All I got is this. Me. Standing here. Telling you that whatever comes next, I want to face it with you." Ruth felt something break open inside her. Something that had been locked away for so long, she'd forgotten it existed. Hope. Real hope. Not the desperate, grasping kind she'd been holding on to for weeks, but the solid kind. The kind that comes from knowing you're not alone. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay. Okay." She reached up and covered his hand with hers. Together. Caleb leaned down, his forehead resting against hers. They stayed like that for a long moment, breathing the same air, sharing the same space. Neither of them heard the horse approaching until it was too late. Well, well, well. Ruth's blood turned to ice. She knew that voice, had heard it in her nightmares for 15 years. She turned slowly, her hand still in Caleb's, and looked into the face of Silas Brennan. He was sitting on a black horse just outside the barn door, his rifle resting across his saddle. Behind him, 2 other men flanked him like shadows. "Looks like I finally found my family," Silas said, his smile sharp as a knife. "And it looks like they've been keeping some interesting company." Ruth's hand tightened in Caleb's grip until her knuckles went white. Silas hadn't changed. Same cold eyes, same cruel smile, same way of looking at her like she was property that had wandered off and needed to be collected. He was thinner than she remembered, his face harder, but that only made him more dangerous. "Silas!" Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "How did you find us? You think you can run 300 miles and I won't follow?" Silas swung down from his horse, his boots crunching in the snow. "I've been tracking you since you left Ruth. Every town, every stop, every person you talk to. You ain't as clever as you think." Caleb stepped forward, positioning himself between Ruth and Silas. "You're on my land." Silas's eyes moved to him, assessing. "And you are?" "Caleb Morrison. This is my ranch." "Well, Mr. Morrison, I appreciate you taking care of my family while they were lost. But they're found now, so we'll be on our way." Silas reached past Caleb toward Ruth. "Come on, Ruth. Time to go home." Caleb's hand shot out, grabbing Silas's wrist. "She ain't going anywhere with you." The two men behind Silas shifted hands, moving toward their weapons. Ruth's heart hammered against her ribs. Silas looked down at Caleb's grip, then back up at his face. "You want to let go of me, friend? I ain't your friend, and she ain't your property. She's my brother's widow. Those are my brother's children. By law and by God, they belong to me. They don't belong to anyone." Ruth stepped out from behind Caleb, her chin lifted. "We're not things to be owned, Silas. We're people, and we're not going back with you." Silas's smile didn't waver, but something ugly flickered in his eyes. "Ruth, darling, let's not make a scene. You've had your little adventure. You've run, you've hidden, you've even found yourself a new man to warm your bed. I understand. You were grieving, but the grieving's over now. The only thing that's over is your hold on us." "Is that what you think?" Silas laughed, a cold sound that made Ruth's skin crawl. "You think you can just walk away. After everything I've done for you, I kept a roof over your head for 15 years, put food in your children's mouths, gave Thomas work when no one else would hire him. You kept us trapped," Ruth spat. "You controlled everything. Our money, our home, our lives. Thomas couldn't even take the children to church without your permission. I was protecting you. You were owning us." Silas's expression hardened. "Careful, Ruth." "Or what?" She stepped closer, her fear transforming into something hotter, something that had been building for 15 years. "You'll hit me. Throw me against a wall. Put bruises on my arms where people can't see." She pulled up her sleeve, showing the fading marks on her wrist. "You already did all that, Silas. You did it the night before I left. You remember when I told you I'd never marry you?" Caleb's whole body went rigid beside her. Silas's eyes narrowed. "You're making things up. Telling stories to make yourself look like the victim." "I'm telling the truth. For the first time in 15 years, I'm telling the truth." Ruth's voice shook but didn't break. "You terrorized me. You terrorized my children. And when Thomas died, you thought you'd finally get what you always wanted. Me. Broken. Obedient. Yours. You are mine. I was never yours, and I never will be." The silence that followed was absolute. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Then Silas moved. It happened so fast, Ruth barely saw it. One moment he was standing there, the next, his hand was around her throat, squeezing, lifting her onto her toes. "You think you can talk to me like that?" His voice was low, dangerous. "You think some rancher with a hero complex is going to save you? Nobody saves you, Ruth. Nobody ever saves you." Ruth couldn't breathe, couldn't speak. Black spots danced at the edge of her vision. Then Silas was on the ground, and Caleb was standing over him, his fist bloody. "Touch her again," Caleb said, his voice flat and cold, "and I'll kill you." Silas's men drew their weapons, but Caleb didn't even flinch. His eyes stayed locked on Silas, who was struggling to his feet, blood streaming from his nose. "You broke my nose." Silas sounded more surprised than angry. "I'll break more than that if you don't get off my land." "Your land." Silas wiped blood from his face. "This ain't about land. This is about family. My family." "They ain't your family." Ruth's voice was raw, her throat already bruising, but she forced the words out. Thomas was your family. I was just the woman you wanted to own. And the children, you never cared about them. You just wanted leverage. Ruth, no. She moved to stand beside Caleb, her shoulder touching his. I'm done listening to you. I'm done being afraid of you. You want to take me back, you'll have to kill me first, because I'm not going, not today, not ever. Silas stared at her, and for the first time, Ruth saw something other than arrogance in his eyes. Uncertainty. He hadn't expected this, hadn't expected her to fight back, to stand her ground, to have someone standing with her. All those years he'd counted on her fear, her isolation, her belief that she had no options. He'd been wrong. You're making a mistake, Silas said finally. A big mistake. Maybe. But it's mine to make. Silas looked at Caleb, then back at Ruth. This ain't over. Yes, it is. Caleb's voice was iron. You come back here, you won't leave alive. That's not a threat. That's a promise. Big words from a man with 2 guns pointed at him. I've had worse odds. Something in Caleb's voice made Silas pause, made him look at this rancher more carefully. Ruth could see him calculating, weighing his options. Fine, Silas said at last. We'll go, for now. He mounted his horse, his men following suit. But this ain't finished, Ruth. You and me, we got unfinished business, and I always collect what's owed to me. He turned his horse and rode away, his men flanking him. Ruth watched until they disappeared over the ridge, until she couldn't hear the hoofbeats anymore. Then her legs gave out. Caleb caught her before she hit the ground, his arms wrapping around her, holding her up when she couldn't hold herself. I've got you, he murmured into her hair. I've got you. The children. Her voice was hoarse. I have to check on the children. They're inside. They're safe. But Silas, he's gone, for now. Ruth pulled back, looking up at Caleb's face. His knuckles were bleeding, his jaw tight with barely contained rage, but his eyes were gentle as they met hers. You hit him, she said. Wanted to do more than that. I know. She touched his chest, feeling his heart pound against her palm. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. He'll be back. I know that too. They stood there for a moment, holding each other in the fading light, 2 people who had found something worth protecting. Then Ruth heard screaming from the cabin. She ran. Her legs were shaking. Her throat was burning, but she ran. Caleb was right behind her, his longer strides eating up the distance. The cabin door was open. Ruth burst through it and found her children huddled in the corner, Hannah standing in front of them like a shield. But they weren't looking at the door. They were looking at Elijah. Her son was standing by the window, Caleb's rifle in his hands, his face white as chalk. Elijah! Ruth stopped in the doorway. Put the gun down. I almost shot him. Elijah's voice was shaking. I had him in my sights. I could have killed him. But you didn't. I wanted to. Tears were streaming down his face. I wanted to so bad, Ma. I wanted to make him pay for everything he did to us. Ruth crossed the room slowly, carefully. I know, baby. I know. Why didn't you let me? He deserves to die. After everything. Elijah, look at me. Ruth reached him and gently, so gently, took the rifle from his hands. If you had killed him, it would have destroyed you. Not because he doesn't deserve it, but because you're not a killer. You're a good boy, a brave boy, and I won't let Silas turn you into something you're not. Elijah collapsed into her arms, sobbing. I hate him. I hate him so much. I know, so do I. Caleb took the rifle and set it aside, then moved to check on the other children. Ruth could hear him talking to them in low, soothing tones, but she couldn't focus on the words. All she could do was hold her son as he cried. It's okay, she whispered. We're okay. We're all okay. But even as she said it, she knew it wasn't true. Silas would be back. He'd said so himself. And next time, He wouldn't come with just 2 men. Next time, he'd come with an army. The night that followed was the longest of Ruth's life. She sat up by the fire, Caleb beside her, both of them watching the windows, listening for hoofbeats that never came. "He won't come back tonight," Caleb said around midnight. "He needs to regroup, figure out his next move." "How long do we have?" "Hard to say. Day or 2 maybe. Depends on how many men he can gather, how patient he's willing to be." Ruth stared into the flames. "Maybe we should run. Take the children and go before he comes back. Run where he tracked you 300 miles. He'll track you 300 more. Then what do we do?" Caleb was quiet for a long moment. "We fight." "With what? Your rifle and my bare hands?" "With whatever we've got." He turned to look at her. "Ruth, running ain't living. You said that yourself. And I meant what I said to Silas. He comes back here, he doesn't leave alive. You can't take on Silas and however many men he brings. Maybe not alone." Ruth frowned. "What do you mean?" "I mean I've got friends, people who owe me. There's a sheriff in town, Daniel Cole. We served together in the war. He's a good man, honest. If I tell him what's happening here, he'll help." "Will he?" "Silas has money, connections. Men like that, they can buy whoever they want." "Daniel ain't for sale." Caleb's voice was certain. "I'd stake my life on it." "You might have to." "Then I will." Ruth looked at this man, this quiet, broken man, who had stumbled into her life like an answer to a prayer she'd stopped believing in. 3 weeks ago, he'd been a stranger. Now, he was willing to die for her. "Why?" she asked. "Why are you doing this?" "You don't owe us anything." "I already told you why." "Tell me again." Caleb reached out and took her hand. "Because for 7 years I've been dead inside. Walking around, eating, sleeping, working, but dead. And then you showed up, you and those 6 children, and something in me woke up. I don't know what it is, Ruth. Don't know if it's love or gratitude or just plain stubbornness. But I know I ain't letting Silas take you. I ain't letting anyone take you." Ruth felt tears sliding down her cheeks. "I'm not worth dying for." "Yes, you are." His grip tightened. "You're worth dying for and living for and everything in between. And I plan to prove it." They sat like that until dawn, hands intertwined, watching the fire burn down to embers. When the first gray light crept through the windows, Caleb stood. "I'm riding to town. Gonna talk to Daniel, see what kind of help I can round up." "I'm coming with you." "No, you stay here with the children. Keep the rifle loaded and the doors barred. I'll be back before nightfall." Ruth wanted to argue, but she knew he was right. Someone had to stay with the children, and she was in no shape for a long ride. "Be careful," she said instead. Caleb leaned down and pressed his lips to her forehead. "Always." Then he was gone, and Ruth was alone with 6 sleeping children and a loaded rifle and more fear than she knew what to do with. The day passed slowly. Ruth kept the children inside, kept them quiet, kept them busy with chores and games and anything else she could think of. She didn't tell them what had happened with Silas. Didn't tell them he might be coming back with more men. They knew anyway. Children always knew. "Mama," Hannah said around midday, "what's going to happen to us?" "I don't know, baby." "Are we going to have to leave?" Ruth looked at her daughter, at this girl who had been forced to grow up too fast, who had carried burdens no 15-year-old should ever have to carry. "I hope not," Ruth said honestly. "I really hope not. I don't want to leave." Hannah's voice was small. "I like it here. I like Mr. Caleb. I like feeling safe." "I know. I like it too." "Then why can't Uncle Silas just leave us alone? Why does he have to keep chasing us?" Ruth wished she had an answer. Wished she could explain the twisted logic of a man like Silas Brennan, who saw people as possessions and love as ownership. "Some men don't know how to let go," she said finally. "They think if they want something bad enough, they're entitled to have it. They can't understand that other people have rights too, have choices. That's stupid. Yes, it is. Hannah was quiet for a moment. Mama, if Uncle Silas comes back, are you going to fight him? Yes. Even if it's dangerous. Especially if it's dangerous. Ruth pulled her daughter close. I've spent 15 years being afraid, Hannah. 15 years letting Silas control me because I was too scared to stand up to him. But I'm not scared anymore. I'm angry. And I'm going to protect this family no matter what it takes. Hannah nodded slowly. Good. The afternoon stretched on. Ruth checked the windows, constantly checked the rifle, checked the children. Joseph and Lily had found a game to play with wooden blocks Caleb had carved for them. Grace was drawing again her sketchbook full of images Ruth was afraid to look at. Elijah sat in the corner, staring at nothing, his face still haunted from the night before. Baby Thomas played at Ruth's feet, oblivious to the tension around him. Ruth was just starting to think Caleb might not make it back before dark when she heard hoofbeats. She grabbed the rifle and moved to the window, her heart pounding. But it wasn't Silas. It was Caleb riding hard, and behind him came 3 other riders. Ruth recognized one of them from town, a tall man with a badge on his chest. She opened the door as they rode up. Ruth, this is Sheriff Daniel Cole. Caleb dismounted, his face grim. He's got news. The sheriff tipped his hat. Ma'am, wish we were meeting under better circumstances. What news? Ruth's stomach was tight with dread. Silas Brennan's been busy. Daniel climbed down from his horse. He's been spreading word all over the county that you kidnapped his brother's children. Says you're an unfit mother, says you ran off with them to shack up with another man. He's got a judge in his pocket who's issued a warrant for your arrest. Ruth felt the ground tilt beneath her feet. A warrant? For kidnapping and endangering minors. Daniel's voice was apologetic. Ma'am, I don't believe a word of it. But the law's the law. If Silas comes here with that warrant, I won't be able to stop him from taking those children. No. The word came out like a bullet. No. He can't have them. I'm not saying he should. I'm saying we need to be smart about how we handle this. Daniel looked at Caleb. I've got 2 deputies who'll stand with us. That makes 5 against however many men Silas brings. It ain't great odds. Better than nothing, Caleb said. There's another option. Daniel's eyes moved back to Ruth. You could come with me. Voluntary-like. Let me take you into town, put you in protective custody until we can sort this out proper. Get a real judge to look at the case, not some bought and paid for puppet. And my children? They'd stay here, with Caleb and my deputies. Ruth shook her head violently. No, I'm not leaving them. Ma'am? I said no. She stepped closer to the sheriff, her chin up. I've been separated from my children before. I know what Silas does when I'm not there to protect them. I know what he's capable of. Her voice dropped. I am not leaving them. Not for an hour, not for a minute, not for anything. Daniel looked at Caleb, who shrugged. Told you she'd say that. Had to try. Daniel sighed. All right then, we do this the hard way. I'll send my deputies out here tonight. We'll set up a perimeter, keep watch. When Silas comes, we'll be ready. What about the warrant? Ruth asked. I'll worry about the warrant. You worry about keeping those children safe. Daniel's expression softened. Ma'am, I've known Caleb Morrison for 20 years. He's the best man I know. If he says you're worth protecting, that's good enough for me. Ruth felt tears threatening again. Thank you, Sheriff. Don't thank me yet. We haven't won anything, but we will. He turned back to his horse. I'll be back at sundown with my men. Until then, keep your heads down and your powder dry. He rode off with the other 2 men, leaving Ruth and Caleb standing in front of the cabin. It's not enough, Ruth said quietly. 5 men against Silas and whoever he brings. It's not enough. It's what we've got. Caleb. He turned to face her, his hands coming up to cup her face. Listen to me. I've been in worse spots than this. I've faced down armies with nothing but a rifle and a prayer. And you know what, I'm still here, still standing, still fighting. This is different. No, it's not. His thumbs brushed away tears she didn't know she'd been crying. This is exactly the same. We've got something worth fighting for. We've got each other. And we've got the truth on our side. The truth doesn't stop bullets. No, but it stops fear. And fear's the only weapon Silas has left. Ruth wanted to believe him. Wanted to believe that truth and love and righteousness were enough to defeat a man like Silas Brennan. But she'd spent too long in the real world to believe in fairy tales. "What happens if we lose?" she whispered. Caleb's jaw tightened. "We won't. But if we do, then I'll die protecting you, and Silas will have to kill me before he touches a hair on any of those children's heads." Ruth closed her eyes. "I don't want you to die." "Then I won't." His voice was gentle, but certain. "I've got too much to live for now." They stood there in the cold holding each other, while inside the cabin, 6 children waited to learn their fate. Somewhere out there, Silas Brennan was gathering his forces. And somewhere inside Ruth, a fire was burning. She had spent 15 years being afraid. She wasn't afraid anymore. She was ready. The deputies arrived at sundown, 2 men named Cooper and Hayes, who looked like they'd seen their share of trouble. They nodded to Ruth, spoke quietly with Caleb, and took up positions around the property without being asked. Ruth watched them from the window, her hand resting on the rifle that hadn't left her side since morning. "Mama." Hannah was beside her, her face pale in the fading light. "The little ones are scared." "I know, baby. I am too. What do I tell them?" Ruth turned from the window and looked at her daughter, at this girl who had been carrying adult burdens since she was 10 years old. "Tell them the truth. Tell them that bad men are coming, but good men are here to stop them. Tell them that no matter what happens tonight, we love them, and we're going to protect them." Hannah nodded slowly. "And if the bad men win..." Ruth's throat tightened. "They won't. But if they do..." "Hannah..." Ruth took her daughter's face in her hands. "Listen to me. If something happens to me tonight, you take your brothers and sisters and you run. Don't look back. Don't stop. You find somewhere safe and you keep them together. Can you do that?" Tears spilled down Hannah's cheeks. "Mama, don't talk like that." "I need to know you can do it, Hannah. I need to know that whatever happens, my children will be okay." Hannah was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded, her jaw set with determination. "I can do it. But you're not going to die, Mama. You promised we'd be a family again. You promised. And I meant it." Ruth pulled her close. "I meant every word." They held each other until Caleb's voice broke through the silence. "Ruth, it's time." Ruth released Hannah and crossed to where Caleb stood by the door. His face was hard, his eyes scanning the darkness beyond the windows. "How long?" she asked. "Daniel sent word. Silas is on his way. 8 men, maybe more." 8? Ruth's stomach dropped. "Against 5, 6. Caleb looked at her. "I'm counting you." "Caleb, you said you wanted to fight. You said you were done hiding." He pressed a pistol into her hands. "Time to prove it." Ruth looked down at the weapon, felt its weight in her palm. She'd never fired a gun before, never even held one, but she'd also never had so much to lose. "Show me how to use it," she said. Caleb's eyes softened. "Point and pull the trigger. It's not complicated." "What if I miss?" "Don't miss." Despite everything, Ruth almost laughed. "That's your advice. Don't miss." "Best advice I ever got." Caleb leaned down and kissed her forehead. "Stay inside with the children. Don't come out unless you have to. And Ruth, yes, I love you." The words hit her like a physical blow. 3 words she hadn't heard in so long she'd forgotten what they felt like. "I love you too," she whispered. Then he was gone, disappearing into the darkness outside. Ruth turned back to the cabin where 6 faces watched her with varying degrees of fear and trust. "All right," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "Everyone into the root cellar, now!" "Mama, no!" Joseph's eyes were wide. "I want to stay with you. You can't baby. I need you to be brave and go with Hannah." "But, Joseph." Ruth knelt in front of her son. "Do you remember what I told you about being brave?" Joseph nodded, his lip trembling. "Being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you do what needs to be done even when you are scared. Can you be brave for me right now?" Joseph's small chest puffed up. "Yes, Mama." "Good boy." She kissed his forehead. "Now go." Hannah herded the younger children toward the trapdoor that led to the cellar, but Elijah didn't move. "I'm staying," he said. "Elijah." "No, Ma." His voice was quiet but firm. "I'm 13 years old. I'm old enough to fight. You're old enough to die, and I won't let that happen. You can't stop me." Ruth looked at her son, saw the stubborn set of his jaw, the fire in his eyes. He looked so much like Thomas in that moment, like the man Thomas might have been if fear hadn't broken him. "If you stay," she said slowly, "you do exactly what I tell you. No arguing, no running off, no trying to be a hero. Understood?" Elijah nodded. "Yes, ma'am." "Get the shotgun from the rack, load it, and stay away from the windows." Elijah moved to obey, and Ruth turned back to the door. Through the glass, she could see shadows moving in the darkness. Caleb, the deputies, positioning themselves, preparing. The waiting was the worst part. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. Ruth's hands cramped from gripping the pistol. Beside her, Elijah stood rigid, the shotgun cradled against his chest. Then she heard them. Hoofbeats. Lots of them. Growing louder. "They're coming," Ruth breathed. Through the window she saw torches flickering in the darkness. 1, 2, 5, 8 more. A small army riding toward the cabin. At the front of them, unmistakable even in the dark, was Silas. He stopped about 50 yards from the porch, his men fanning out behind him. In the torchlight, his face was sharp, predatory. "Ruth." His voice carried through the cold night air. "I know you're in there. Come out. Let's end this peacefully." Caleb's voice answered from somewhere to the left. "She ain't coming out, and you ain't coming in." Silas laughed. "Morrison, I should have known you'd be playing hero. Tell me, does she know about your past? About what you did in the war?" Ruth saw Caleb stiffen, but he didn't respond. "Ask him about Lawrence," Silas continued. "Ask him about the things he did to Confederate prisoners. Ask him how many men he killed in cold blood. That's enough." Sheriff Cole stepped forward, his badge glinting in the torchlight. "Silas Brennan, I'm ordering you to stand down." "On what authority?" "You've got no jurisdiction here, Cole. I've got a warrant signed by a territorial judge. Those children belong with family, and Ruth Brennan is an unfit mother who— That warrant ain't worth the paper it's printed on, and you know it." Daniel's voice was ice. "You bought that judge, same as you buy everything else." "Prove it." The challenge hung in the air. Ruth's heart was pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. 8 men against 6. Those were bad odds. Very bad odds. But then, something unexpected happened. Another voice came from the darkness. A woman's voice, old but strong. "I can prove it." Everyone turned. From behind Silas's men emerged a figure Ruth hadn't seen in years. Agnes Holloway, the widow who lived on the edge of town. She was riding a mule of all things, and she looked like she hadn't slept in days. "Agnes," Silas's voice was uncertain. "What are you doing here?" "What I should have done 15 years ago." Agnes climbed down from her mule and walked toward the cabin, ignoring the guns pointed at her. "Sheriff Cole, I've got something you need to see." She reached into her coat and pulled out a bundle of papers yellowed with age. "These are letters," she said. "Letters Thomas Brennan wrote to me before he died. Letters describing what his brother did to his wife and children. The beatings, the threats, the way Silas controlled every aspect of their lives. Ruth's breath caught. Thomas had written to Agnes. Thomas and I were friends. Agnes continued. He came to me when he couldn't take it anymore, told me everything, asked me to hold on to these letters in case something happened to him. She looked at Silas with undisguised contempt. He knew you'd come for Ruth eventually. He knew you'd try to take what wasn't yours. Silas's face had gone white. Those letters don't prove anything. They prove motive. They prove pattern. And they'll be enough for a real judge to throw out that warrant and issue one for you instead. Agnes handed the papers to Sheriff Cole. Assault, intimidation, false imprisonment. It's all there, documented by a man too scared to speak up while he was alive. You lying old witch? Careful, Silas. Daniel's voice was dangerous. That's enough witnesses to hang you twice over. The men behind Silas shifted uncomfortably. Ruth could see doubt creeping into their faces. They'd signed up to collect a runaway wife, not to participate in what was starting to look like something much darker. This changes nothing. Silas snarled. Those children are my blood, my family. They're not your anything. Ruth stepped out onto the porch, the pistol still in her hand. They're my children, mine and Thomas's. And Thomas wanted them as far away from you as possible. You don't know what Thomas wanted. Yes, I do. Ruth's voice was steady. I know because he told me. Right before he died, when you weren't there, when you were too busy counting your money to sit with your dying brother. He told me to run. He told me to take the children and never look back. He told me you were poison and that the only way to save our family was to get them away from you. Silas's face twisted. He was delirious. The fever. He was clearer than he'd ever been. For the first time in 15 years, he wasn't afraid of you. Because he knew he was dying, and dead men have nothing to fear. The words hit their mark. Ruth could see Silas flinch, see something crack in that cold facade. You turned him against me, Silas said, but his voice was weaker now. You poisoned him against his own blood. No, you did that yourself. Every time you hit me, every time you threatened our children, every time you made Thomas feel like less of a man because he wasn't cruel like you. Ruth took another step forward. Thomas loved you once. You were his big brother. He looked up to you, and you destroyed that. You destroyed him. I made him, Silas roared. I gave him everything, a job, a home, a family. You gave him chains. You gave him fear. You gave him a life so small and so controlled that the only freedom he ever found was in death. Ruth's eyes burned with tears she refused to let fall. And now you want to do the same thing to me, to my children. But I won't let you. I would rather die than go back to that life. That can be arranged. Silas's hand moved toward his gun. Everything happened at once. Ruth raised her pistol. Caleb shouted something. Shots rang out. And Silas Brennan fell. Ruth didn't know who had fired. Didn't know if it was her bullet or Caleb's or one of the deputies. All she knew was that Silas was on the ground, clutching his shoulder blood seeping between his fingers. His men scattered. Some fled into the darkness. Others threw down their weapons and put their hands up. Within moments it was over. Ruth stood frozen on the porch. The pistol still raised, her whole body shaking. Ruth. Caleb was beside her, his hand gentle on her arm. Ruth, it's over. Put the gun down. She couldn't move, couldn't think, couldn't process what had just happened. Mama! The voice broke through her paralysis. She turned to see Hannah and the other children emerging from the cellar, their faces white with fear. Mama, are you hurt? Hannah ran to her, throwing her arms around Ruth's waist. We heard shots. We thought, I'm okay. Ruth finally lowered the gun, her hands trembling. I'm okay, baby. Everyone's okay. She looked past Hannah to where Silas lay groaning on the ground, Sheriff Cole standing over him. Is he dead? She asked. Nope. Shoulder wound. He'll live to stand trial. Daniel's voice was grim but satisfied. Which is more than he deserves. Ruth watched as the deputies hauled Silas to his feet. His face was gray with pain and shock, but when his eyes met hers, she still saw that familiar rage burning underneath. This isn't over, he hissed. Yes, it is. Ruth's voice was calm, steady. It was over the moment I stopped being afraid of you. They dragged him away, and Ruth finally let herself breathe. Caleb's arm came around her shoulders, and she leaned into him, drawing strength from his warmth. You did it, he murmured. We did it. No. He tilted her chin up, forcing her to meet his eyes. You faced him down. You told the truth. You didn't run, didn't hide, didn't back down. That was all you. Ruth felt tears finally spilling down her cheeks. I was terrified. I know. Bravest thing I ever saw. Around them, the chaos was slowly resolving into order. The deputies rounded up Silas's men. Agnes was talking to Daniel, showing him the letters. The children were crying and laughing and asking questions all at once. But for just a moment, Ruth and Caleb stood in their own small world, holding each other in the cold night air. What happens now? Ruth asked. Now we wait. Trial will take a few weeks, maybe a month. Silas will try to buy his way out, but with those letters and Agnes's testimony, he won't succeed. And then, Caleb was quiet for a moment. Then you're free, really free. Free to go wherever you want, do whatever you want. Ruth pulled back and looked at him. What if what I want is to stay here? Something flickered in his eyes, hope maybe, or fear. Then you stay. What if what I want is to stay here with you? Caleb's breath caught. Ruth. I love you, Caleb Morrison. I know it's crazy. I know we've only known each other a few weeks. I know I'm a widow with 6 children and more baggage than any man should have to carry. But I love you, and I want to build a life with you. Here, on this ranch, if you'll have us. Caleb didn't answer with words. He kissed her. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't careful. It was desperate and fierce and full of everything they'd both been too scared to say. When they finally broke apart, Ruth was crying again, but this time the tears were different. I'll take that as a yes, she whispered. That's a yes, Caleb confirmed. That's a yes for as long as you'll have me. Ew. Joseph's voice cut through the moment. Mama's kissing Mr. Caleb. Ruth laughed a real laugh, the first one in longer than she could remember, and pulled her son into the embrace. Yes, I am. Is that okay with you? Joseph considered this seriously. Does this mean he's going to be our new PI? Ruth looked at Caleb, who looked back at her. If you want me to be, Caleb said quietly. Joseph's face split into a grin. I want you to be. You teach me stuff, and you don't yell, and you make Mama smile. Then I guess I'm your new pa. Joseph threw his arms around Caleb's waist, and Ruth watched her heart so full it hurt as the man she loved embraced her son. One by one, the other children joined them. Hannah with tears streaming down her face, Grace clutching her sketchbook, Lily holding baby Thomas's hand. Even Elijah, his young face still haunted but lighter somehow. Only one person hung back. Ruth turned to see Agnes watching them with a sad smile. Mrs. Holloway. Ruth crossed to the older woman. I don't know how to thank you. Don't thank me. Thank Thomas. Agnes's eyes were bright with unshed tears. He loved you, Ruth. In his way, he really did love you. He just didn't know how to show it. Why didn't you come forward sooner? I could have what stood up to Silas when Thomas was still alive. Gotten us both killed. Agnes shook her head. I was scared. Same as you. Same as Thomas. Silas had a way of making everyone around him feel small and helpless. Had, Ruth repeated. Had. Agnes smiled. Past tense. Thanks to you. Ruth embraced the older woman, feeling the frail bones beneath her coat, the trembling of age and exhaustion. Will you stay? Ruth asked. Tonight at least. You shouldn't be riding back alone in the dark. I'd like that. Agnes pulled back her eyes, moving to where Caleb stood, surrounded by children. He's a good man. Hold on to him. I intend to. The rest of the night passed in a blur. The deputies took Silas and his men back to town. Agnes settled into the cabin's only comfortable chair and fell asleep within minutes. The children were put to bed one by one, each of them needing extra hugs and reassurances before they could close their eyes. Finally, just before dawn, Ruth and Caleb found themselves alone on the porch. The sky was lightening in the east, pink and gold, chasing away the darkness. I keep waiting to wake up, Ruth said softly. Keep thinking this is all a dream and I'm going to open my eyes and be back in that wagon running through the snow, Silas right behind us. It's not a dream. Caleb took her hand. It's real. All of it. I've never been free before. Not really. I went from my father's house to Thomas's house, to running from Silas. I've always belonged to someone. You don't belong to anyone now. Not even me. Ruth turned to look at him. What do you mean? I mean that what we're building here, it's not about ownership. It's about partnership. Equals. You're not my property, Ruth. You're my... Hell, I don't even know the word. My everything. My reason. My purpose. Those are a lot of words for a man who claims he ain't good with them. Caleb smiled a real smile, one that reached his eyes. You bring out the poet in me, I guess. Ruth leaned her head on his shoulder. Caleb, yeah. Thank you. For what? For finding us, for saving us, for being stubborn enough to fight for people you didn't even know. Caleb was quiet for a moment. You want to know the truth. Always. That night in the storm, when I heard your children crying, I almost rode past. Almost told myself it wasn't my problem, wasn't my business. I'd been alone so long I'd forgotten what it felt like to care about anything. What changed your mind? I don't know. Something. Maybe God, maybe fate, maybe just plain dumb luck. He turned to face her. But whatever it was, I'm grateful, because riding past would have been the worst mistake of my life. You couldn't have known that then. No, but I know it now. He lifted her hand and pressed his lips to her knuckles. I know that everything I lost, everything I grieved, everything I thought was gone forever, it led me here, to you, to those children, to this moment. Ruth felt tears threatening again. You really believe that all the pain was worth it? I believe that pain can have purpose. Doesn't make it hurt less, doesn't make it fair, but it can mean something if we let it. They sat together as the sun rose, painting the snow in shades of gold and rose. Somewhere inside the cabin, a child coughed. Someone turned over on their pallet. Baby Thomas made a soft sound in his sleep, the sounds of family, the sounds of home. Caleb, Ruth said. Yeah. I think I'm ready to stop running now. He pulled her closer. Good. Because I've got nowhere else I want to be. The sun climbed higher, chasing away the last shadows of the night. And for the first time in 15 years, Ruth Brennan faced the dawn without fear. The weeks that followed Silas's arrest were the strangest of Ruth's life. For 15 years, she had lived in fear. Fear of saying the wrong thing, fear of looking at someone the wrong way, fear of breathing too loudly when Silas was in a mood. That fear had become so much a part of her that she didn't know who she was without it. Now slowly, she was learning. Mama, can I go to the creek with Joseph? Ruth looked up from the bread she was kneading to find Lily standing in the doorway, her coat already on her face, bright with anticipation. The old Ruth would have said no, would have kept her children close, kept them safe, kept them where she could see them at all times. But this was a new world, a safe world. Stay where Elijah can see you, Ruth said. And be back before supper." Lily's face split into a grin. "Yes, Mama." She ran off, her laughter trailing behind her like music. Ruth watched her go, feeling something loosen in her chest. Her children were playing outside, running, laughing, being children. It was such a simple thing, such an ordinary thing, but to Ruth, it felt like a miracle. "You're getting better at that." She turned. Caleb was leaning against the doorframe, watching her with that quiet intensity that still made her heart skip. "Better at what?" "Letting go." Ruth went back to her kneading, but she smiled. "It's not easy." "Didn't say it was." Caleb crossed to her and stood close, not touching, just present. "But you're doing it anyway. That's what counts." "I keep waiting for something bad to happen. Keep thinking that if I let my guard down, if I stop watching and worrying, everything will fall apart." "Maybe it will." Caleb's voice was matter of fact. "Maybe something bad will happen tomorrow, or next week, or next year. But living in fear of maybes ain't living at all." Ruth set down the dough and turned to face him fully. "When did you get so wise?" "Around the same time a stubborn woman with 6 children crashed into my life and refused to leave. I seem to recall you were the one who refused to let us leave." Details. But he was smiling, really smiling in a way that transformed his whole face. Ruth reached up and touched his cheek, feeling the rough stubble against her palm. "I love you." "I know." He covered her hand with his. "I love you too." They stood like that for a moment, just breathing, just being. Then Hannah's voice shattered the peace. "Mama Ryder coming." Ruth's heart seized. She was out the door before she could think, her body responding to 15 years of conditioning. Ryder coming meant danger. Ryder coming meant run. But Caleb's hand on her arm stopped her. "Easy, look." Ruth forced herself to focus. The rider approaching wasn't Silas. Silas was in jail awaiting trial, and it wasn't one of his men. It was Sheriff Cole, his badge glinting in the afternoon sun. Ruth's legs went weak with relief. "Daniel." Caleb stepped off the porch to meet him. "News." The sheriff dismounted, his face grave. "Trial's set for next week. Judge Harrison's coming up from Cheyenne. Real judge, not one of Silas's puppets." "That's good, isn't it?" Ruth asked, coming to stand beside Caleb. "It's good." Daniel hesitated. "But there's something else. Silas has been talking, making accusations, saying things about you, Mrs. Brennan." Ruth's stomach dropped. "What kind of things?" "The kind of things a desperate man says when he's trying to save his own neck. He's claiming you were unfaithful to Thomas, claiming the younger children ain't even Thomas's, claiming you murdered your husband and ran off with a lover." "That's insane." Ruth's voice came out sharp. "Thomas died of a mining accident. There were witnesses. There was—" "I know." Daniel held up a hand. "And so does everyone else. But Silas has money, and money buys lawyers, and lawyers can twist anything into something ugly." "What are you saying?" Caleb's voice had gone hard. "That she's in danger." "I'm saying the trial might not be as simple as we hoped. Silas is going to fight dirty. He's going to drag Ruth's name through the mud and try to make her look like the villain instead of him." Ruth felt the ground shifting beneath her feet. She'd thought it was over. She'd thought they were safe. "What do I do?" she asked quietly. "You tell the truth. Same as you've been doing." Daniel's eyes were kind but serious. "You get up on that witness stand, and you tell everyone exactly what Silas did to you and your family. You don't hold back, you don't soften it. You don't try to protect anyone's feelings. You tell the ugly truth, and you trust that the judge will see it for what it is. And if he doesn't, if the judge believes Silas's lies—" Daniel was quiet for a moment. "Then we figure out what comes next. But Ruth, I've known Judge Harrison for 20 years. He's a hard man, but he's fair. If you tell him the truth, he'll believe you." After Daniel left, Ruth sat on the porch staring at nothing. Caleb sat beside her, not speaking, just waiting. "I thought it was over," she said finally. "I thought we were done fighting." Fighting's never really over. Life's just one fight after another, some big, some small. Caleb took her hand. But you don't have to fight alone anymore. Remember. I remember. Then stop looking like you're carrying the whole world on your shoulders. We'll get through this, together. Ruth wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that everything would work out, that truth and justice would prevail. But she'd learned a long time ago that wanting something didn't make it real. The next week passed in a blur of preparation. Agnes came by every day, coaching Ruth on what to expect at the trial, what questions the lawyers might ask, how to stay calm under pressure. Don't let them rattle you, Agnes said. Silas's lawyer will try to make you angry, try to make you say something you don't mean. Don't give him the satisfaction. What if I can't keep calm? What if I break down? Then you break down. You're human, Ruth. Nobody expects you to be made of stone. Agnes squeezed her hand. But remember why you're doing this. Not for revenge, not for pride. For your children. For every woman who's ever been trapped by a man like Silas and was too scared to speak up. Ruth thought about that. Thought about all the years she'd suffered in silence, convinced that speaking up would only make things worse. Convinced that no one would believe her anyway. I was so ashamed, she admitted. All those years I was ashamed of what was happening, like it was somehow my fault. It wasn't your fault? I know that now. But then, Ruth shook her head. I kept thinking if I was just a better wife, if I was just quieter, more obedient, less difficult, maybe he'd stop. Maybe Thomas would stand up to him. Maybe things would get better. That's what they want you to think. Men like Silas, they're experts at making their victims feel responsible for their own suffering. Agnes's voice was fierce. But you know the truth now. You know that nothing you did or didn't do made any difference. Silas was going to be cruel no matter what, because cruelty is who he is. Then why didn't I leave sooner? Why did I stay so long? Because you had children to protect. Because you had nowhere to go. Because leaving seemed more dangerous than staying. Agnes leaned forward. Ruth, every woman in your situation asks herself the same questions. Why didn't I leave? Why didn't I fight back? Why did I let it go on so long? But those questions are traps. They put the blame on you instead of where it belongs. Ruth felt tears sliding down her cheeks. I wasted so many years. No, you survived so many years. There's a difference. Agnes wiped Ruth's tears with gentle fingers. And now, you're going to stand up in front of God and everyone and tell the truth. That takes more courage than running ever did. The morning of the trial dawned cold and gray. Ruth dressed carefully, choosing the plainest dress she owned, the one that had belonged to Caleb's wife. It seemed fitting somehow, wearing the clothes of another woman, who had loved this man, who had dreamed of building a life with him. You look beautiful, Caleb said, appearing in the doorway. I look scared. That too. He crossed to her and took her hands. You ready? No. Good. That means you're taking it seriously. He lifted her hands to his lips. Whatever happens today, I'm proud of you. You know that, right? I know. And whatever happens, we're still a family. You, me, those 6 children. Nobody can take that away from us. Ruth nodded, not trusting her voice. The ride to town took 2 hours. Ruth sat beside Caleb on the wagon bench, Hannah and Elijah in the back with the younger children. Agnes followed on her mule, looking determined despite her age. The town was busier than Ruth had ever seen it. Word of the trial had spread, and people had come from miles around to watch. Some faces were curious. Others, hostile. Others, sympathetic. Ruth kept her eyes forward and didn't look at any of them. The courthouse was a small wooden building with a single courtroom. By the time they arrived, it was already packed. Sheriff Cole met them at the door. How you holding up? Ask me after, Ruth said. Inside the room fell silent as they entered. Ruth could feel eyes on her, weighing her, judging her. She lifted her chin and walked to the front where a chair had been set for her beside the judge's bench. And there, on the other side of the room, sat Silas. He looked different than the last time she'd seen him. Thinner, paler, his fine clothes replaced by rough prison garb. But his eyes were the same cold, calculating, burning with hatred when they met hers. Ruth forced herself not to look away. "All rise." The judge entered, a stern-faced man with iron-gray hair and a no-nonsense manner. He took his seat and surveyed the room. "We're here today on charges against Silas Brennan: assault, intimidation, false imprisonment, and conspiracy to kidnap. Mr. Brennan has pleaded not guilty. Let's hear the evidence." The prosecutor, a young man from Cheyenne, presented the case methodically. He called Sheriff Cole, who testified about the night of the confrontation. He called the deputies who corroborated the story. He called Agnes, who read Thomas's letters aloud, in a voice that shook with emotion. Through it all, Silas sat stone-faced, whispering occasionally to his lawyer. Then it was Ruth's turn. She walked to the witness stand on legs that felt like water. She placed her hand on the Bible and swore to tell the truth. "Mrs. Brennan," the prosecutor's voice was gentle, "can you describe your relationship with the defendant?" Ruth took a breath. "Silas is my brother-in-law. Was my brother-in-law. He was married to my husband's sister, who died before I came into the family." "And how would you characterize his behavior toward you during your marriage to Thomas Brennan?" This was it. The moment she'd been dreading and preparing for. "Controlling," Ruth said. "Cruel. Violent. Can you be more specific?" Ruth closed her eyes for a moment, gathering her courage. When she opened them, she looked directly at the judge. "Silas controlled every aspect of our lives. Where we lived, where Thomas worked, how we spent money, who we were allowed to talk to. If I did something he didn't like, spoke out of turn, looked at him the wrong way, forgot to do a chore, he would punish me." "Punish you how?" "He would hit me, grab me hard enough to leave bruises. Once he—" Ruth's voice faltered. "Once he pushed me down the stairs. I was 6 months pregnant with my son Joseph. I almost lost the baby." A murmur ran through the courtroom. "And your husband, did he know about this abuse?" Thomas knew, but he was scared of Silas. We all were. Silas held all the power, the money, the jobs, the housing. If Thomas stood up to him, we would have had nothing. What happened after Thomas died? Ruth's hands clenched in her lap. Silas came to our house the night after the funeral. He said that Thomas had owed him money, and now the debt was mine to pay. He said I had to marry him, or he would take my children. And when you refused, he hit me, threw me against the wall, told me I had no choice." Ruth's voice was steady now, strong. "That's when I decided to run. That same night I packed up my children and fled. I knew if I stayed, he would destroy us." The prosecutor nodded. "Thank you, Mrs. Brennan. No further questions." Silas's lawyer stood. He was a slick man in expensive clothes, the kind of lawyer who specialized in making guilty men look innocent. "Mrs. Brennan, you claim my client abused you for years. Why did you never report this to the authorities?" "Because I was afraid. Because Silas had connections everywhere. Because I didn't think anyone would believe me. Or perhaps because it never happened." "It happened. You have no witnesses, no medical records, no evidence of any kind except your own word. I have the letters Thomas wrote. I have the bruises that Agnes saw when she visited. I have 6 children who grew up watching their mother be terrorized. Children who would naturally support their mother's story." The lawyer smiled shark-like. "Mrs. Brennan, isn't it true that you were unhappy in your marriage? I was unhappy with the circumstances of my marriage, with being controlled and abused, not with Thomas himself. And isn't it true that you had feelings for other men during your marriage?" Ruth felt her face flush. "No." "Really? Because my client says he witnessed you behaving inappropriately with several men over the years. Flirting, making suggestive comments, perhaps even more." "That's a lie." "And what about Mr. Morrison?" The lawyer gestured toward Caleb. You moved into his home mere weeks after your husband's death. You're living with him now, aren't you? As his, what, housekeeper? Or something more intimate? I am not going to dignify that with a response. Mrs. Brennan, I'm simply trying to establish. What you're trying to do is make me look like a whore so the judge won't believe me about Silas. Ruth's voice rose. But it won't work. Because the truth is, the truth no matter how you try to twist it. Silas Brennan abused me for 15 years. He terrorized my children. He drove my husband to an early grave with his cruelty. And when I finally had the courage to run, he chased me across 300 miles of wilderness to drag me back. Mrs. Brennan, I'm not finished. Ruth stood up, her whole body trembling. You want to know why I'm living with Caleb Morrison? Because he saved my life. He found me dying in a blizzard with 6 starving children, and he took us in when he didn't have to. He protected us when Silas came with 8 armed men to drag us back. He stood between my family and a monster, and he didn't ask for anything in return. She turned to face the judge directly. Your Honor, I'm not a perfect woman. I've made mistakes. I stayed too long, kept quiet, too long, hoped too long that things would get better on their own. But I am not a liar, and I am not going to let this man, she pointed at Silas, destroy my children's futures the way he destroyed their past. The courtroom was silent. The judge looked at Ruth for a long moment. Then he turned to the lawyer. I think we've heard enough character assassination for one day. Do you have any relevant questions for this witness? The lawyer's face reddened. No, Your Honor. Then we'll take a recess. Court reconvenes in 1 hour. Ruth walked out of the courthouse on shaking legs. She made it to the back of the building before her knees gave out. Caleb caught her. You did good, he murmured into her hair. You did so good. I lost my temper. You told the truth. Ain't the same thing. Ruth clung to him, letting herself be weak for just a moment. What if it's not enough? What if the judge believes Silas anyway? Then we'll appeal. We'll fight. We'll do whatever we have to do. Caleb pulled back and looked into her eyes. But Ruth, I don't think that's going to happen. I saw the judge's face when you were talking. He believed you. You can't know that. No, but I can hope. He kissed her forehead. And right now, hope is enough. The verdict came 2 hours later. Ruth stood between Caleb and Hannah. Her younger children crowded around her legs as the judge read his decision. In the matter of the territory of Wyoming versus Silas Brennan, I find the defendant guilty on all charges. Ruth's knees buckled. Caleb's arm tightened around her. Mr. Brennan, you have abused your position of power to terrorize a vulnerable woman and her children for over a decade. You have attempted to use the legal system as a weapon to continue that abuse. You have shown no remorse and no understanding of the gravity of your crimes. The judge's voice was iron. I sentence you to 15 years in the territorial prison. May God have mercy on your soul, because I have none. Silas's face went white. For the first time since Ruth had known him, he looked truly afraid. You can't do this, he sputtered. I have rights. Take him away. The deputies led Silas out of the courtroom. As he passed Ruth, he turned to look at her one last time. This isn't over, he hissed. Ruth met his eyes without flinching. Yes, it is. And then he was gone. Ruth stood in the empty courtroom long after everyone else had left. She couldn't move, couldn't think, couldn't process what had just happened. It was over. 15 years of fear, of running, of surviving. Over. Mama. She turned. Hannah was standing in the doorway, the younger children behind her. It's over, baby, Ruth said, and her voice cracked. It's finally over. Hannah ran to her, and then they were all crying, all holding each other, all finally letting themselves believe that the nightmare was truly finished. 2 months later, on a clear spring morning, Ruth stood in front of the mirror in Caleb's bedroom, their bedroom now, and looked at herself. She barely recognized the woman staring back. Not because of the dress, though it was the finest thing she'd ever worn, white cotton with delicate lace at the collar. Not because of her hair, which Hannah had pinned up with wildflowers. It was her eyes. For 15 years, her eyes had been haunted, scared, watchful, always looking for the next threat, the next blow, the next reason to run. Now they were calm, peaceful, happy. She looked like a woman who had finally come home. "Mama, you look so pretty." Ruth turned to find Lily in the doorway. Her own dress freshly pressed her hair in careful braids. "Thank you, baby. So do you." "Are you scared?" Ruth considered the question. A little, but the good kind of scared, the kind that comes before something wonderful. Like Christmas morning. Exactly like Christmas morning. Hannah appeared behind Lily. "Everyone's ready. Caleb's waiting." Ruth took one last look in the mirror. Then she turned away from her reflection and walked toward her future. The ceremony was small, just family and a few friends. Sheriff Cole Agnes, the minister from town. They stood in front of the cabin, the same cabin where Caleb had brought Ruth and her children on that terrible night 3 months ago. Caleb was waiting at the makeshift altar, looking uncomfortable in his best clothes, but unable to stop smiling when he saw her. "You look beautiful," he said as she reached him. "You already told me that." Bears repeating. The minister cleared his throat. "Shall we begin?" The vows were simple, the kind of promises that meant something because they were small enough to keep. "I promise to stand beside you in good times and bad. I promise to care for your children as my own. I promise to love you not perfectly but persistently. I promise to build a life with you one day at a time." When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Caleb kissed her with a tenderness that made her heart ache. "I love you, Ruth Morrison," he murmured against her lips. "I love you too, Caleb Morrison." Behind them, the children erupted in cheers. That night, after the celebration had wound down and the children were finally asleep, Ruth and Caleb sat on the porch one last time. The stars were brilliant overhead, scattered across the sky like diamonds on velvet. "You know what I keep thinking about," Ruth said. "What?" "That night in the storm, when you found us." She leaned into him. "I was so sure we were going to die. So sure that everything I'd done, all the running and fighting and hoping, was for nothing. But it wasn't. No, it wasn't." She turned to look at him. "You saved us, Caleb. Not just our lives, our souls." "You saved yourselves. I just opened the door." "Don't do that. Don't make yourself small." Ruth touched his face. "You're a good man, the best man I've ever known. And I'm grateful every day that you didn't ride past that night." Caleb was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "You want to know something? Always. I almost did ride past. Almost told myself it wasn't my business, wasn't my problem. I'd gotten so used to being alone, so used to not caring about anything, that helping someone felt like too much work." "What changed your mind?" "I don't know. Something in the way those children were screaming. Something in the way the wind sounded, almost like a voice telling me to stop." He shook his head. "Maybe it was Sarah and Samuel. Maybe they were up there somewhere pushing me toward you." Ruth felt tears prick her eyes. "You believe that. I believe that the people we love don't really leave us. They stay in our hearts, in our memories, in the choices we make." Caleb took her hand. "Sarah would have loved you. Would have loved watching our children play together." "Our children." Ruth smiled through her tears. "I like the sound of that." "So do I." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars wheel overhead. "Caleb." "Yeah." "What do you want for the future?" He considered the question. "I want to watch those children grow up. Want to teach the boys how to work the land and the girls how to ride. Want to see Hannah find a good man who treats her right. Want to hold our grandchildren someday." "That's a lot of wanting." "You asked." Ruth laughed softly. "I did." She squeezed his hand. "I want those things too." But I want something else. What's that? I want to never be afraid again. I know that's probably impossible. I know fear is part of life, but I want to live without the constant weight of it. I want to wake up every morning knowing that the people I love are safe, that nobody's coming to hurt us, that we're finally truly free. Caleb pulled her close. Then that's what we'll build. A life without fear. One day at a time. One day at a time, Ruth repeated. From inside the cabin, a child cried out in their sleep. Ruth started to rise, but Caleb stopped her. I'll go. She watched him disappear through the door, heard his low voice soothing whoever had awakened. A year ago, she'd been running for her life with 6 starving children and no hope of escape. Now she had a home, a husband, a family that was finally truly whole. The road had been long and hard and full of pain, but it had led her here to this moment, to this man, to this life she'd never dared to imagine. Ruth tilted her face up to the stars and said a silent prayer of thanks. Not to any god in particular, just to the universe, to fate, to whatever force had guided her through the storm and into Caleb Morrison's arms. The cabin door opened and Caleb reappeared. Joseph had a nightmare. He's okay now. Thank you. For what? He's my son now. That's what fathers do. My son. 2 simple words that meant everything. Ruth stood and crossed to him, wrapping her arms around his waist, pressing her cheek against his chest. I love you, she said. I love you too. He kissed the top of her head. Come to bed. In a minute. She stayed in his arms a moment longer, listening to his heartbeat, feeling the solid warmth of him. Then she pulled back and looked up at his face. Thank you, she said. For finding us. For fighting for us. For not giving up. I could say the same to you. Then let's say it together. Thank you. Thank you. They smiled at each other in the starlight. Then hand in hand, they walked into their home, closing the door on the past and opening their hearts to the future. Outside, the wind whispered through the grass. Inside, 6 children slept peacefully. And somewhere in the vast Wyoming sky, the stars kept their silent watch over a family that had been broken and scattered and lost, but had finally, against all odds, found their way home. The storm was over. The sun was rising, and Ruth Morrison, nay, Brennan, nay, Harper, nay, nothing but a scared girl with nowhere to go, finally understood what it meant to be free. Not free from fear. Fear would always be there lurking in the shadows. Not free from pain. Pain was the price of loving anything at all. But free to choose. Free to hope. Free to build a life worth living. That was enough. That was everything. That was love.